Hello, this is Robert Picardo, the holographic doctor from Star Trek Voyager, and Commander Woolsey from Stargate Atlantis. If I only get in Star Wars someday, I will have made the trifecta. And you're listening to Kneel Before Pod, because you are smart.
Kneel Before Blog presents Kneel Before Pod.
Hello, and welcome to a vengeful edition of Kneel Before Pod. The 4th of June 1982 saw the US release of Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, with the UK release following shortly after on 16th of July. That makes the film 35 years old, so we decided to have a chat about it to mark the occasion. We may be a little late to the party, but we're here. Many say that this film is the finest example of Star Trek in existence, and many have never heard of it. So we're here to talk about why we love it, because we have heard of it. Naturally, I can't do this alone, so it's time to beam in the old bridge crew. Welcome aboard, guys. We have Nick, hopefully in one piece.
Hi there.
And Sandy, hopefully also in at least one piece.
Yes.
Excellent.
Hang on. Uniform, check. Feet, check. 1, 2, 3. Everything's there. Yep, cool.
I'd like to add I'm not in uniform, guys. Okay.
Well,
there you go. You just destroyed the illusion. Oh, well, okay.
I do have a Star Trek Academy t-shirt on, though, so...
I have a t-shirt that's not Star Trek on, so it's kind of... Yeah.
I have a Justice League t-shirt on.
Here we are down to the Kneel Before Pod fashion parade.
Hey!
Yeah. Anyway, so almost 35 years ago, there was a film that came out, you know, that people kind of like. A Star Trek film, I think. The second one in a long series of films. Also,
Pee-wee goes to space.
Star Trek II, Electric Boogaloo.
Oh, see, if I always wanted to see that.
Yeah.
You told me we were going to be talking about fashion, not Star Trek.
Well, Star Trek and fashion always go hand in hand.
Especially if Thysos has anything to do with it.
Okay, so, no, the film wasn't called Electric Boogaloo, that's probably the next one. This one was called Wrath of Khan, and it was released in 1982, so about 5 years before I was born. And it's pretty well regarded, isn't it? I mean, people like it, I don't know.
You just made me feel very old.
It's generally held up as the standard for Trek films. I mean...
Yes.
I guess, you know, thoughts vary. It's a solid movie.
Yeah, they've been trying to copy it.
Popularity.
They've been trying to copy it for the last 5 Star Trek films. So
that's probably true, yeah.
Yeah, anytime I hear anybody talking about any kind of Star Trek film, they always say it was almost as good or not as good or just as good as Wrath of Khan. It seems to be the benchmark.
The problem is, I think Wrath of Khan has created that benchmark's a problem because they spend far too much time trying to copy the structure of that film. There's a bad guy. They're trying to kill people. They must fight them to the end. And they recreate that ad nauseum. It's like every Star Trek movie does not have to be about fighting a bad guy.
And revenge. That's not revenge.
Even Beyond was about revenge.
Yeah. And lately it seems to be the Big Black Death Ship as well, although doesn't exist in this.
Yeah, the one that wasn't about revenge. What is it? Actually, number 3 wasn't revenge, really, was it?
Actually, I hate to say it, but 3 is my favourite original series movie.
No, you
I like
mentioned
3.
that before once, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Although, no, I think every Star Trek film from First Contact onwards has been about revenge.
Oh, yeah.
Insurrection. Oh, yeah, okay, Insurrection. No. It's about the revenge of the children against the parents. Yeah, fair enough.
But it's still revenge. Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. No, Yeah, okay.
Yeah, at least First Contact flipped it on its head and made the vengeful one one of our main characters.
The First Contact is my benchmark for the Next Generation onwards films.
Yeah, I mean, I probably prefer First Contact to Wrath of Khan.
You just gotta love the Borg. It's just fantastic.
But,
I prefer
I guess
Wrath
it
of Khan.
depends on which crew is your favourite, and I guess these days I'm more of a TNG guy, but...
Yeah. So, yeah, for me, my favourite Star Trek film, as I mentioned on the 50th anniversary podcast, is Star Trek 6. I just think it's a much better showcase for all of the characters, because I suppose it's designed to be. It's the last one. Whereas this one is very much the insular... It's very much a Kirk and Spock story. Everyone else is kind of hovering around that. Even McCoy is just kind of there to comment on things, and he's not actually a huge part of the story itself.
That's a fair point, although I think Khan is the better script because of that focus, whereas 6 is a bit... I don't think 6 has that focus, and I think it suffers for it. But again, these things are subjective, and it really depends on what your preferences are.
Yeah, I love the whodunit aspect in 6, so I think that's really well put together.
Interestingly, because I can't stand that, because there's too much sad humour and really poor detective work, but,
Yeah.
6 is not the only one that's been guilty of stuff like that, so...
Indeed.
2's far from perfect either.
Yeah, of course. Nothing is. Nothing's perfect. Sandy, where would you place this in relation to maybe the other original series films? The Next Generation films can be a separate entity unto themselves.
Yeah, let's just discount anything higher than 6 for the time being. This would definitely be my number 1 spot, with 6 coming up as number 2.
Fair enough.
Very, very close number 2.
Yeah.
I mean, I love both those two films. They, actually, coming to think of it, it's very... I say that, but then they've got number 4, which I love as well. The humour in that is just great. I think, actually, I would have to say 2 and 6 are a joint first position, and 4 comes number 2. The others I really couldn't care for.
I would probably have to say 3 is my favourite, 4 and 2 are probably joint second, then motion picture, then I can take or leave the other 2.
Interesting.
Fair enough. Yeah, I'm not going to do a kind of ranking because I haven't really thought about it. But yeah, this is my second favourite of all the Star Trek movies, also all the original series movies. And I'm not going to bother bringing the spoiler alert because it's 35 years old. If you've not seen it, what are you doing?
I spoiled Serenity for one person 10 years after it has been out by someone who really likes that universe. Seriously. So yeah, hit the spoiler alert.
Okay.
Because you never know.
Let's not make the same mistake Kirk did, and we'll go to spoiler alert then. I mean, he went to red alert. Whatever. The analogy almost works.
Almost.
Right, now we're free to talk about whatever we want for this 35-year-old film.
Yep.
So I guess we'll just start on story. I mean, it has one. What are your thoughts on doing a film that's a sequel to a TV episode that, your wider audience might not have seen? I thought it was an interesting idea. I mean, I think when I saw this film, I wasn't intimately aware of the original series at first.
Same.
So I was able to just go with the fact that, these people have met before, and Khan hates Kirk for some reason. And that's it. It doesn't need to be any more than that, really.
I agree. I don't think it was a problem at all, and I think there was enough explanation of that in the film. The script was solid. It was really well written. It was tight. It covered everything you needed to know. You didn't need to watch Space Seed to get this movie. It was all there, and the performances brought it out as well. So no, I think it was clever to go back to its roots because that's going to appeal to fans, but it was also written in a way that anybody could come in and watch this movie and enjoy it.
Yeah, plus most of Khan's beef is to do with stuff that happened after Space Seed anyway, so Space Seed doesn't really help you with this film, other than it introduces the Khan character. That's about it.
Absolutely.
I had no idea of Space Seed before I watched this film. It's one of the first Trek films I remember actually watching. It was a long, long time ago now. I saw Space Seed, it could have been at least 10 years after I saw the film. And as Nick said, I didn't need to watch Space Seed in order to get what was going on in the film. It's explained rather clearly. Okay, he has beef with Kirk, and he's going to use everything at his means to get at Kirk.
Yeah, and even then, the continuity doesn't even work, because the first thing is they say that Chekhov, I mean, I don't actually care. Like, it's fine, but
see. The way I see that, everybody, I have a couple of friends who poo-poo the film because of that. And I'm like, have you ever thought for one moment that he could have been on the Enterprise? The Enterprise had 450 personnel. Chekhov may have been promoted into the helmsman position, been just walking the decks.
Using the toilet.
Non-issue.
It is a complete non-issue, but people who poo-poo it because of this and point it out saying, oh, this is one of its biggest flaws, I'm like, it isn't necessarily a flaw.
I like Walter Koenig's explanation anyway, that Chekhov used the last of the toilet paper and Khan was upset at him, you know.
Yep, Chekhov!
I think there's also a comic that explains he was part of the landing party that left them on Ceti Alpha 5, but, you know, who really cares at this point?
Yeah, who cares at this point? The film adequately survives that potential error.
It's also interesting, Nicholas Meyer says in the commentary that as a justification for that, like, he obviously doesn't care himself, but he talked about how Conan Doyle would write inconsistencies in his Sherlock Holmes stories. You know, like Watson would talk about a pain in his leg, pain in his arm, pain in his head, all that stuff. And he wasn't bothered as long as his readers were still enthralled, which they so obviously were. So continuity doesn't matter as long as you're invested in this film. I most certainly am.
Mm-hmm.
That's a fair point.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, I thought it was an interesting anecdote from Meyer. He's like, I don't really care. It's a slight inconsistency, but
well, at the end of the day, he's a filmmaker. He doesn't care. He just cares about making an interesting film, and
he does it well.
Mm-hmm.
And he wasn't a Star Trek fan, which seemed to be the key to making this succeed in a way, because he was able to look at the franchise from a lateral perspective and see it differently. And this film became the design point for all the films that followed, essentially. Not so much the TV stuff, but certainly the original series films all followed this design template of all this kind of rustic, all business, militaristic stuff. And, you know, it works. It's the most celebrated design aesthetic, or one of the most celebrated design aesthetics of the franchise.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of the way the story's told, I mean, what are the thoughts on how it kind of how it's paced and how it goes along and how it deals with its themes?
I think the problem with Wrath of Khan and discussing it with this, there's not a huge amount to criticise because it's a very tight script. The themes are very clear. The performances are good. The direction's good. Certainly, it's not perfect. There's things you can criticise. If anything, I would have liked some of the stuff that was cut to stay in it. But it's a good film. It's a solid film. I mean, you can nitpick things like, why does Scotty come up to the bridge with Peter Preston, who's dying, instead of just taking him to sickbay? That makes no sense. But, you know, that was for, you know, impact. It was for visual storytelling, I guess.
Yeah, the shock value.
Well, it follows on from the previous line perfectly as well. Let's see how badly we've been hurt.
Exactly.
Hurt, yeah.
But from an in-universe point of view, it doesn't actually make any sense whatsoever. So obviously, there's stuff you can criticise, but it's nitpicky stuff.
Yeah.
Overall, it's a great movie. It's a great script. It's really difficult to really criticise it.
Yeah, and I think part of our aim here is to talk about why we like it so much. I mean, the end of the day, I'm not looking for reasons to hate stuff anyway. You know, I think if I'm going to hate something, it's going to do a fine job of convincing me of that on its own without me bringing in any baggage.
The other thing it has going for it is it's clearly Shatner's best performance in years.
Agreed.
Yeah. Well, Nick Meyer pointed out how he had to do certain things to goad Shatner into performing well, because there was that whole thing about when the prefix code scene. Apparently, when he was delivering like "Here It Comes," he would do it in a kind of really hammy way that made it pretty obvious what he was up to. But Meyer just did multiple takes until Shatner got bored and just delivered it the way that it was supposed to be delivered. So
yeah. Sneaky but clever.
Directing your actors, especially someone with as pronounced an ego as William Shatner.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, the effort paid off.
It did indeed.
Yeah. And I really like the theme of aging, because obviously you can't pretend that the original series cast are getting any younger by this point.
No.
It's just, it's just a fact, and it's. I don't think it's ever explicitly mentioned in the film. Well, it might be in the book that Kirk's about to celebrate his 50th birthday.
I can't remember if it's in the book, actually. I have read the book, but I mean, it was years and years ago.
Yeah. He's certainly hitting an age that's significant to him.
I think, interestingly, it's not something they really followed through on in the later movies. In the later movies, they kind of ignored the whole aging thing and went back to just treating them as if nothing's changed.
Yeah. Although this film's about him kind of reclaiming his youthful exuberance. Because he's a bit stuffy at the start. He's a bit of a dick, to be honest.
But I'm fine with him reclaiming his youthful exuberance, but it also kind of ignores the fact that he has gotten older after that.
Yeah.
Not so much in 3. I think they still acknowledge that in 3. But once you kind of get to Star Trek 4, they kind of let it go a bit. And by the time you're in 5, well, it's just like he's 34 again.
He's climbing
just
mountains.
Ignore the fact. I mean, we have Nichelle Nichols doing fan dances. I was like, I'm sorry, Nichelle Nichols is not 25 anymore.
Yeah. And then I suppose 6 is about the end. Well, it's a film about endings, so it's they have acknowledged their age and they're ready to throw in the towel and so on.
Again, they don't really acknowledge it that much.
No.
Well, they kind of do, because Scott is talking about having just bought a boat.
Yeah.
And
I suppose you're right. Yeah.
Kirk knows that they're coming to an end, and he kind of resists it. But if you've been in a position all your life, and you're now having to relinquish that position because you're getting too old for it, you're going to be a little bit resistant.
Actually, I suppose you've got a fair point. I mean, yeah, in hindsight, 5 really ignores it, but I suppose they do get back to it to a degree in 6, which was probably Nick Meyer again. Meyer,
I think.
Meyer.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. In 2, they do start to go on with it. I mean, Kirk, he's got that brilliant line, galloping around the cosmos is a game for the young.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then there's he's wearing glasses. He uses glasses in the prefix scene.
Because he's allergic to some wonder eye healing drug.
Retinox 5.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Whatever that does.
Well, I'd imagine it helps your retinas focus properly again.
Yeah.
Probably rejuvenates your lenses, because it's your lens that gets the problem as you get older.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Doesn't help Geordie, but help.
No. But then Geordie doesn't need reading glasses.
No.
Geordie's eyes just weren't working, period.
Yeah. The glasses thing, I mean, that's a bit of an obvious, you're getting older, have a pair of glasses, and then there's a bit where he's kind of still hungover when he's on the Enterprise. Where McCoy says wonderful stuff, that Romulan, and Kirk's just like, shut up.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's that kind of subtle aging stuff creeping in, but it only really works with Kirk. It only factors in with Kirk.
Mm-hmm.
Spock is, still a young man by this point, pretty much.
In Vulcan terms, yeah.
Yeah. He's, like, not even middle-aged, so...
No. Barely out of his teens, really.
Yeah. And the rest of the crew, well, they don't have that much to do. McCoy is McCoy retired before the motion picture, but for some reason he's still there.
Well, he gets reactivated, and one assumes that he just decides, you know what, I might as well just stick around. You guys are always getting into trouble, and you need me to get you out of it.
Yeah,
in his mind,
stick around and play in simulations for no reason.
Stick around and argue with Spock more.
Yeah,
and find pots of coffee.
But I kind of get the... I mean, obviously the Spock's death thing was... I mean, it was something that was coming from the start of the film. And they did that false death at the beginning to kind of put people off it. So it's like, all right, okay, that must be the rumour I heard then, and then they can get on with the rest of the film. But I kind of feel like Saavik, Kirstie Alley's Saavik, is kind of being groomed as the Spock replacement in case Leonard Nimoy was actually done with the franchise.
Oh, he was, for all intents and purposes, done.
Yeah.
He only agreed to do 3 because they allowed him to direct 4.
And 3.
Allowed him to direct 3.
And 3, sorry, yeah. That's the only way. I think that's the only way they managed to get him to go to say yes.
Yeah, but the yeah, and if he is done with it, or he was done with it at that point, maybe. But I do feel like Saavik is essentially, here's the new Spock. Throughout the film,
that was clearly the intent.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And she was good. I mean, I thought she blended into the cast quite well.
That way, you could also use the you could also view that line. Do you want a tranquilizer? It could also have a double meaning now. You're replacing one Vulcan with another.
Yeah. It's weird how they keep thinking, because they almost did that before when it was going to be a TV series where they had, was it Zon?
Zon, yes, the one who essentially, unfortunately, ended up dying in a transporter incident in the motion picture.
Was Sonak.
That was Sonak. No, sorry, it was the same guy who was going to play Zon.
No, this guy who was going to play Zon was Commander Branch on the Epsilon 9 station. David Gautreaux. So he didn't play Commander Sonak. That was another actor.
I'll have to check. I'll have to check where my that reading material got its source from then.
But no, David Gautreaux played Branch, who was the commander on Epsilon 9. But he did die in it, obviously.
Oh yeah.
He was preserved.
I who played Sonak, but it was a different actor.
He was preserved in every detail.
Yeah, but Kirk wanted a Vulcan. Apparently, for some reason. But
they go well on the shelf. Needed an elf on the shelf.
Oh, that's space racist.
He's not real. So
no, none of this is real. Chekhov could have been on the Enterprise because he's not real.
You'll still trigger someone with that.
Probably.
That's the intention.
Yeah, there are people that identify as elf. Seriously.
Well, that's a shame if they're on a shelf then. Sorry, we don't want to categorise anybody.
No,
that's funny.
We don't.
And organise them on shelves. Anyway.
Yes. So in terms of the story, so the kind of aging theme goes throughout. It kind of weaves in and out of the revenge story. It's as in Kirk is fighting his own decrepitness, I suppose. At the same time, he's fighting Khan, who's much sharper than he is, at least in the beginning.
I don't think he's fighting his own decrepitness as such. He's definitely fighting a ghost in the closet. That's one thing for sure. I mean, he's just learned...
Of which Khan is also a ghost in the closet.
Yes.
He's fighting his own past in 2 ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you've got his former love interest.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't know it at first, but later on he finds out he's also got a son.
Well, I think the implication is he
already knew, yeah. Because the first thing he asks is that David?
Yes,
yeah,
yes, you're quite right. You are quite right, yeah.
The question is when is David born? I mean, he's probably not around during the original series, is he?
He must have been.
Yeah.
Because the implication is that David's in his early 20s.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's certainly been around long enough to get his PhD.
Mm-hmm.
And even if he was particularly smart, I can't imagine he got that much before his early 20s. And
He could be a
experienced enough
Sheldon.
to be working on this project with his mother. So, if you assume he was kind of 23 at the most, at the youngest,
Yeah.
so that would put him, he must have been born which is why I think a lot of people always assume Carol Marcus was the little blonde lab technician that Gary Mitchell pointed Kirk towards, that Kirk almost married.
There's no reason that she couldn't be.
There's no reason that she couldn't have been. And I think there is some... Possibly they were doing a little bit of playing with that idea in Star Trek Into Darkness by introducing Carol Marcus. But again, that was a movie that we don't talk about.
Yeah. Carol Marcus, who's she, according to the reboot films, like she's gone and no explained.
Yeah, that was pretty bad. She should have been in Beyond, but hey ho.
Well, the question is there a place for him Beyond? Probably not.
Probably not. She probably didn't have a natural place in there. So yeah, that's a fair point.
Yeah.
There were enough characters in it already.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, the Carol Marcus character is interesting actually, because you've got this. It's Nick Meyer often has said so many times that he wanted someone who's who was obviously very strikingly beautiful as well as being intelligent, because Kirk wouldn't settle for anything less. She has to be his intellectual better in many ways, and that's what she is. She's much more intelligent than he is, obviously, because she's a genius, and and she can clearly match wits with him.
Absolutely.
Although I think the film doesn't do enough with their relationship. Actually, it just kind of bubbles along in the background.
That was kind of time constraints as much as anything.
Yeah, there was enough going on in the film as is. They established that they had a relationship. And just grew apart. I don't think they had to expand on that anymore, really.
Because I've had people that saw this film before they saw any of the original series and asked, and when I mentioned that Khan had appeared before, and they asked if Carol Marcus had, because there could almost be an original series episode where she turns up based on her contribution here, because there is that same amount of implied history.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, to be honest, I kind of feel like they almost could have used one of the characters from the original series and just recast them.
Yeah.
You get the likes of Ruth, who we see in Shore Leave, or, what's her name? From Deadly Years. I can't remember.
Yeah.
But you could have used a character from the original series, but you didn't have to.
No.
And besides, that would then introduce a much younger son, or a much younger.
Well, if you went with someone like Ruth, who certainly was an ex from before he was Captain Kirk, you could easily say that. The implication that he was around 20 when he knew Ruth, or Academy era, so that would work.
Yeah,
but again, it could be anybody. If you assume that, sorry.
Someone would nitpick and say, well, why wasn't it wasn't the child aspect mentioned in the episode as well?
But then people nitpick anyway, so...
Yeah.
Yeah.
If Carol Marcus was the little blonde lab technician, why did they not mention the child then,
Yes.
People are going to nitpick regardless.
Yeah,
well, it
I'm
could
sure
be
there's a novel somewhere that explains that it was Carol, but... who knows?
That other people didn't really know. Can't remember the exact details, but were the crew? I don't think the crew were all that surprised, were they? But no, they were surprised that David was his son.
Spock knew.
I can't remember.
I think Spock may have known, but then Spock was his left-hand man and right-hand man at the same time. So
McCoy's bound to have known as well.
It's possible.
He has no reason to tell Sulu, though. For instance, or Scotty, or anyone else. Spock and McCoy are his friends, so they're bound to know. Plus, there's that definite beat of familiarity when Carol beams aboard and she's like, "Hello, Mr. Spock," and so she clearly knows him, as she would. It's just one of those things. There's so much you can infer from the way the dialogue's delivered that you get so much of this relationship hinted at, which I find quite interesting.
Yeah, a lot of it is down to our own assumptions about what we take away from that, and I don't think there's a right or a wrong way to interpret that.
Yeah.
I think they obviously had an intent behind it, but I don't think there's anything wrong with you taking your own intent to that and taking your own ideas about that story away.
Yeah.
And I think that's the way it should be.
Yeah. I'm just glad they don't sit down for 20 minutes and fill us in on the entire, ins and outs of this relationship.
If someone did a fan film like that, they would.
Yeah. Well, it's like there's a book called Imzadi that's about Troy and Riker's relationship.
Oh, yes.
Before they split up, but who cares? You just...
I saw that.
Actually, Imzadi is a time travel novel.
Is it?
And it's much more complex than that. Mm-hmm.
Well, all I know from it is the blurb is...
It involves the Guardian forever.
Right.
I haven't read it in years, but it is actually a pretty good story.
But does it chronicle their relationship?
Some of it, yes. But to be honest, I can't remember all the details. It's been like 20 years since I read it.
Right, yeah. Fair enough. But my point is, anyway, you can... It's fun to speculate about these things, so as soon as someone comes and tells that story, it becomes less interesting.
That's a very fair point.
Yeah.
I agree.
But yeah, Carol's quite interesting anyway. You don't see much of her, and you never see her again. She turns up in books and things like that, but...
and I think everybody's kind of been left wanting to know more about her, which I think is kind of your storyteller's job.
Yeah, and she was supposed to have a bit in Star Trek 3, which made it into the book, but it doesn't make it into the film. But I think it was just her going around and telling family members that scientists had died. Which,
I can't remember.
Wouldn't have been that interesting to watch on screen, really.
I'm trying to remember, having read, because I read the books at the times they came out.
Yeah.
I can't recall. I want to say there's a scene where Kirk tells her about David's death. And I can kind of picture it, but I don't know if I'm imagining it, because it's that long since I've read it.
That would be in the fourth one, maybe.
Yeah.
Because in the third one he's kind of busy at the time. But, yeah. In the Kirk son stuff, I think that works pretty well because, when they say there's a lot of... they're a lot alike, and David is very headstrong and impulsive, and...
Oh, they're a lot alike.
Yeah. And he resents him at first, which is quite interesting. I suppose Kirk has been like an absentee father, but he was following Carol's wishes, which is a bit weird. I mean, that's why you've never heard of him before. Like you don't see Kirk in the original series writing a letter to his son or whatever else. But I thought it was a bit extreme when he said, "There's a guy out there trying to kill me, and you show me a son who'd be happy to help him." I don't think he's that. Like, he hates him that much. But yeah, it's quite interesting, and obviously you get the payoff at the end where he's like, "Yeah, I'm kind of proud to be your son," and whatever else. I'm not sure what really triggers that, but
I think
the lengths he went to.
I think more than anything, I suspect there was stuff they wanted to they would have liked to have brought out there, but there probably wasn't time to address a lot of those things in the movie. So a lot of it is kind of, you're meant to assume that actually he's seen what his father's gone through and what he's done and that kind of thing, and he's proud of what his father's done. Okay, maybe you're not the asshole I thought you were.
Yeah.
But again, I don't think they spend as much time on that as they perhaps needed to.
Yeah.
To bring that out more. I mean, it's pretty clear in the scene itself that that's the case, but it would have been nice to see a little bit more of that, I suppose.
Well, the kind of Kirk's family stuff is a bit of a means to an end anyway. It's just to kind of show him what he's lost over the years and what his career has cost him as well.
And ultimately, that really does end up costing him his son.
Yeah. Not until the next one, but yeah.
No.
Well, yeah, the son he never knew, that kind of thing. Yeah, Kirk obviously made a commitment to his career and the Enterprise, but not... and when he had a family out there and he did, that was a decision that he made, and that was a decision that Carol also made with him, I suppose. It's like, well, you can do that, but I'm going to raise our son the way that, I want to, I suppose.
Yeah. No, I think that's right.
Kind of fits. It's also touched upon slightly in 6 as well. In Generations.
Yeah, although he's pining after some other woman.
Yeah, that doesn't make that. I never understood that either. Although it could have been.
I always thought that should have been Carol.
Yeah, why not? Like, why isn't it?
Who the hell knows?
Who's Antonia?
Really, I know. Why? I mean, I suppose the idea that maybe he and Carol would have got back together is possibly stretching things. But then maybe instead of it's like, oh, some woman he met years and years, maybe it should have been him going back to when he was a lot younger.
Yeah.
And he and Carol separated. And he ends up in David's life and David doesn't die and he has a very different life. That would have made more sense because surely that would be the biggest regret in Kirk's life, that he wasn't part of his son's life and then his son died.
Yeah.
And surely the thought of going back and correcting that would be his biggest regret. So all of a sudden it's like, Antonio, that we've never heard of, is like, meh?
Although it's been well documented that the ranch was Shatner's fantasy, not Kirk's fantasy.
Yeah, well, there's a shocker.
Yeah. No, Kirk would totally want to live on a ranch with horses. Absolutely. Use mine. Yeah, that'd be more Picard's fantasy than anyone else's.
Possibly.
Yeah.
No, that would rather be in excavating some dusky old ancient civilization.
Yeah.
As opposed to being in a
Victorian house
having a Christmas party. Like, what? Seriously?
That somehow has a merry-go-round in it for some reason.
Yeah, that was just stupid. But, there's plenty of that for it. Anyway, that's a
different podcast.
Indeed.
At some point, yeah.
There are issues.
Yes. Very much so. So, in terms of we've covered a bit of Kirk, and I think Spock kind of runs parallel to him, even though he doesn't really have an arc as such in this film. His arc is ultimately, he's fully formed and he doesn't change throughout the story. But that's what Spock often does. He's just kind of there. He's a fixed point. Everything else kind of revolves around him. And...
Well, I think Spock's arc in this is fully embracing that humanity that he had. I mean, he has embraced it, but I think this goes that extra step, and he makes the ultimate sacrifice for his colleagues and his friends and his family. That's a step of development. I suppose it's something would have... When you see him do it in the original series, like something like Galileo 7, he's this logical, cool, calculating... There was more to him than that. There were more layers than that. But essentially, that's the way he's presented. And his reasons. He'll sacrifice himself in the original series because he cares about his friends, but also because it's his duty. Whereas in Khan, that sacrifice is nothing to do with duty. It's a purely emotional decision to do that.
Yeah, because he could have ordered any number of techs to go in there and do exactly what he did.
Yeah. And I suppose there's the kind of the idea of the Kobayashi Maru is a bit of a theme as well. The kind of everybody facing death. Because he, it's said early in the film, you had the virtue of having never even tried, because Spock was never interested in command, and you had to at least sit it, I suppose, to take command, at least the traditional way. But he was happy where he was. Well, happy in inverted commas. He was content where he was, I suppose, is more Vulcan. But ultimately it was, when he's faced with the Kobayashi Maru, what does he do? He puts himself on the line to make sure everybody else gets out, which is, the test of his character, and he passes in that sense. But throughout the rest of the film, he's kind of there. He performs the same role he does in the original series. He's the logical side of the debate, whereas McCoy is the emotional side, and then Kirk's in between.
It's certainly, with the exception of Star Trek V, which I think is not a very good movie, it's probably the most original series their relationship is since the original series. But, to be fair, they've only had one movie at that point.
Yeah.
But they're much more like themselves than they certainly were in motion picture. Albeit older versions of themselves. Genuinely older versions of themselves.
Yeah. Well, the Genesis debate is a key scene for all three of those characters, McCoy included, and what you've got is Spock sitting there saying, here are the implications of this thing, and he outlines it in a very kind of scientific manner, and McCoy's like, are you crazy? Like, what's going on here? What does this even mean for, from a whatever moral point of view? And Spock's like, well, I'm not talking about that, I'm just, and Kirk's just sitting there listening, and he doesn't chime in until until they're finished.
Mm-hmm.
Until he has all the data so he can say his piece. And that's the way they always worked, which is which is great. That obviously Nick Meyer recognised that by watching a handful of episodes. Yeah.
Are you green-blooded inhuman, and then he doesn't get to finish that?
There's so much casual racism.
But that is the Kirk and the Spock and McCoy relationship, isn't it?
Yeah.
McCoy is always somewhat annoyed by Spock's cold logic.
Yeah, and it's the whole the wrong hands, and he's like, whose are the right hands? And it's these interesting debate points that they just kind of cycle through because Spock isn't interested in having the debate. He's just there to kind of give you the headlines, and I guess it's because it's not something they're thinking about because they just need to know what Genesis is because Carol was talking about it on a garbled transmission,
which then is strangely replaced in 4 with Kirk's face.
Yeah, he made his. Well, his was the report.
So they didn't have to pay the actress again.
Yeah,
I think it's as simple as that, and that's probably why also Carol Marcus wasn't mentioned in Generations either, just in case there was still some sort of residual thing that they would have had to pay.
Yeah, they would have to pay Nicholas Meyer, who created the character.
They would have had to pay Nicholas Meyer.
That explains who Antonia is, then.
That's why you get Tom Paris instead of Nicholas Locarno.
Well,
exactly.
It's different in a movie as opposed to a TV show. In a TV show, you'd have to pay for every instance. In a movie, the movie's kind of a one-off, so it's not such a big issue. So they could have done. I mean, to be fair, let's face it, they reused Savick on 3 occasions.
Yeah, with 2 different actresses.
And they were going to use Savick in 6. The only reason they didn't is because Roddenberry didn't want them to use Savick in that way.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think
I do agree with it.
Yeah.
Having said that, at the end of the day, Savick was Nick Meyer's character.
Yeah.
If he wanted to do that with his character, they probably should have let him.
Yeah.
Well, although
I wouldn't want to see that myself, but I don't think it would have been the wrong choice to do.
Although thinking about it now, it would have been a bit of a surprise for the audience, I suppose.
Certainly.
They wouldn't have expected that of her.
She was so regulation and so green that I don't think it would. I think it would be a slightly out of character, actually. But it would be a nice turn-up.
I'm
It
not
would be
sure
a nice.
that is. I think people that are very rule-bound are sometimes the ones that are taken in by these things.
It's
Although Star Trek 6 is like 15 years later anyway, isn't it? I mean,
And, she could easily have changed in that. You don't know what's happened to her in that time.
It actually would have been made for a better reveal, a better surprise.
And for Spock, a bigger betrayal, really.
Yes, because apparently, if we listen to the hearsay, in number 4, apparently she was pregnant with Spock's child.
Well, that is, if I remember rightly, in the novelization.
Yeah. Which were based on earlier versions of scripts. So
which is why she stayed on Vulcan.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, although it's not explicitly stated, which means they don't have to bring it up ever again.
No,
she just stays on Vulcan for some reason.
But if it were mentioned, for example, and then she betrays Spock and crew in 6, then it would just have even more impact.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, but what we got was what we got.
Indeed.
Still a good film.
Yeah, and Savick as a character, you don't find out an awful lot about her in this film, other than she's a student that Spock has some interest in.
Mm-hmm.
She's a Vulcan, she's a gifted student, she's in Starfleet, which I think is seen as a bit of a rarity at this point.
I wonder if
she was supposed to be half Romulan at that point.
Yeah, that was that was in the novelization.
And there is dialogue that was recorded, but it was all cut.
Yeah, rape gangs and stuff. She had a rough upbringing, that kind of stuff.
Is it possible that he also sponsored her entry into Starfleet?
Well, I think that's likely.
Yeah,
the implication was that Spock was sort of a guardian to her.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Or she may simply have just been looking up to him as the only other Vulcan in Starfleet that we knew of at that time. I mean, yes, we know about that.
There was a lot of behind the scenes chatter about the fact that she was half Romulan, about the fact that Spock had been some kind of mentor to her. And certainly, I mean, there's novels out there that, and I don't know how much of this is based on background, but of the fact that she was brought up on a rough planet and Spock was the one that rescued her and kind of sponsored her and things like that.
Well, the mentor thing is clear. That much is obvious. Mm-hmm. It's very clear that Spock has an interest in her more than he has other cadets because he interacts with her. Yeah, absolutely.
And there is actual film dialogue acknowledging that she's half Romulan. It was never used. I'm pretty there's a cut scene out there somewhere that actually states it.
Yeah, but it ain't in the film.
That'd be interesting.
It ain't on the film, no.
Yeah. So therefore, non-canon in that respect. But and for the purposes of this film, she's a Vulcan. That's what absolutely. She is. But there is that hint of a bit of extra passion. She's very kind of forthright, and and there's parts where emotion does creep through. She seems sort of.
That's the thing. I mean, Vulcans are not without emotion.
Yeah, because she seems sort of timid at one point.
If you compare it to young Spock in the cage, that's not. Which is in some ways. That's all retconned, but you could say that that's not unusual for a young Vulcan.
Yeah.
To be a bit more passionate, a bit more fiery.
Yeah, and she's still finding herself, and she's not really a cadet, she's a lieutenant, which suggests that she's done some leapfrogging.
Yeah, that's all a bit vague and unclear, really, isn't it?
It could be that she was in the sciences department or something like that, and is making the conversion to command. Hence why she's doing the Kobayashi Maru test.
Yeah, and sitting at the helm or sitting at a station during a training cruise and stuff.
Yeah, that would make all the sense in the world then if she's doing a conversion.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why she knows so much about the regulations as well.
Yeah,
because fresh cadets don't always, even after 2 or 3 years, don't always know all the regulations.
Well, or in Kirk's case, never.
On Kirk's case, never. Yeah.
Yeah. My favourite bit of dialogue involving Saavik is the bit where Spock says, "Have you ever piloted a ship out of space dock?" And she's like, "No." And it's like, "Well, you're not getting to here," because she just tells someone else to, which is not the same thing.
It's just like in Next Generation when, "Have you ever manually docked the saucer number 1?" No. Oh, there you go. Now you're doing it. Okay.
Yeah.
Helmsman, dock the saucer. What the fuck? Seriously.
It's like, oh,
they're doing nothing.
I got to tell someone to fire manoeuvring thrusters. What a privilege.
Yeah. But, yeah.
For everything, there is a first time.
Indeed.
Oh, so stupid. But, I don't know. It's also the fact they keep calling her Mr.
Well, that's just naval parlance, really.
Yeah.
That annoys me, though.
Gender is irrelevant in the military.
True.
In the 23rd century.
And it's relevant again in the 24th century when Janeway doesn't like being called Sir.
Yeah.
So,
Janeway's a captain, she can do what she wants.
Yeah. But Ma'am will do in the crunch.
Yeah, or whenever they can be bothered. Yeah. So, there's nothing really to say about the rest of the bridge crew. Sulu doesn't have anything to do. He says a couple of things. Uhura answers the phone like she always did.
Not much new there.
Yeah.
Chekhov just gets threatened. Yeah.
Chekhov probably has the most to do of any of the supporting characters.
He gets that thing in his ear, doesn't he?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. He also has quite a bit of meaningful dialogue when he's just on the bridge of the Reliant and things like that, which seems to be a bit of a halfway house for former Enterprise crewmen because you've got Kyle as well.
That's true.
Finally out of the transporter room.
Yeah.
Janice Rand isn't there, but she's on space dock for some reason. Yeah. Waiting for Excelsior to launch whenever that'll happen.
Indeed.
This is the first time you ever see another class of Starfleet ship, isn't it?
I guess.
You don't ever see... Because any time you see anything in the original series, it's, another Constitution class.
It's always the Enterprise model kit with different lettering on it.
Yeah. If they bothered with the different lettering, which,
Yeah. Sometimes
the Ultimate Computer, they did some split screening where they just had 4 versions of it on the screen.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Or either that, it was just a rotating ball of light.
Yeah.
Or anything, whatever, Yeah, that's actually quite true. I mean, okay, in Space Seed, it's not exactly a Starfleet ship, but it is a different design of human ship at the very least.
Yeah, it's an old Earth ship, yeah.
Exactly. But no, you're quite right. This is the first time that we see something on screen, anyway, that is noticeably a completely different configuration.
Yeah, and it's just a spare part that they had for the saucer with some nacelles stuck on it, pretty much.
Sometimes if you keep it simple,
it's fine. It's it's a fair enough design, I think.
It's in itself. It started off a whole new argument about where is the navigational deflector then, and stuff like that.
Yeah, had people wondering.
Well, I think back then people didn't really know what the navigational deflector really was, so
Yeah.
they hadn't really decided that was part of what its function was.
It was more.
It was a sensor dish.
Yeah.
It was more the Next Generation that established its key role in the in spaceflight.
Let's modify it because we can't have it ever do its intended thing. We'll just keep modifying it to suit the situation.
Yeah, it's done everything, hasn't it? Really,
it does anything. Yeah, whatever plot you need solved, the navigational deflector will be involved.
It is a plot device. That is for sure.
In some way or another. Yeah, whatever. But they're relying. Pretty simple design, but it's pretty effective. The fact is, it looks different enough, so when they're fighting, you know which one's which.
That's primarily the reason why they did it. Yes.
Yeah. Because they could have just mocked up another model of the Enterprise, but there's also the implication that it can be run by a few people, as it is.
If I remember in the novelization, it's not what you see in the novelization is not what it's... The implication in the novelization is that it's an old, original series Constitution class ship.
Really? I don't remember the novelization well enough.
It's an old rust bucket.
Yeah.
And I may be misremembering an implication that's an TOS era Constitution, but it's certainly implied it's a much older, beaten down ship.
Uh-huh.
We know the Constitution class goes through a refit in its life, so it's quite possible that the Miranda class actually had those styling cues first, and then they went, well, those nacelles work really well with that class. Let's test it on the Constitution and see how it works, because we know that there was the Enterprise was more or less the test bed, or was it? It was, because some people call the refit the Enterprise class.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that kind of tracks if you kind of squint your eyes a little.
It's a newer ship than the Enterprise, though, definitely because of the registration number.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Although the Enterprise might be newer in terms of because it had the refit later, but
indeed.
But then the Enterprise in this film is just a training ship, anyways.
Yeah, the Enterprise has been retired from active service for all intents and purposes, because when you're a training ship, then that's generally for naval vessels. That's end of life.
Yeah, and that explains why all the tech looks so crappy. The giant communicators and things. It's just old stuff that they're using to train people with.
That's true to life as well. The training ships and everything don't always have best of kit.
Yeah,
they have whatever's been replaced with newer kit from line craft.
Yeah, and I mean I do like the Reliant design. Actually, it's just so simple, and then you get variations of it later on. Whatever the Saratoga was in Deep Space Nine.
It was a Miranda class variant.
It was a Soyuz class, wasn't it?
That was in TNG Cause and Effect.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's where they just basically got the Reliant model and added cannons and bits,
Yeah.
probably bits of either tank or submarine models onto it.
Go faster, stripes.
Spray painted it, and there you go. You've got another class of ship.
Yeah.
It kind of makes sense. I mean, if you got a stable space frame, and you only need certain aspects changed to make a certain class of ship that can fulfill a different role. You just use the same space frame, and just edit it slightly.
Look, I don't know if you ever played the game Star Trek Legacy. Is it Legacy on the PC?
No, but I've heard of it.
You basically go through all the eras, and you get to the you get through the Enterprise era, and you get to the original series era, and you get the Enterprise, but you can also get other ships, and there's like 23rd century or old school 23rd century style ships that look like the Reliant, except they've got slightly lighter colouring and the same kind of nacelles as the Enterprise. So there's a suggestion that they got refitted as well, maybe, but.
That's an idea that's been around for a long time.
Yeah, I've seen
pretty
people,
much since as long as that movie's been out.
Yeah,
I've seen people who created 3D models of a Miranda class with TOS styling, TOS nacelles and TOS everything really. And usually, what they do, they put in a little dish that's coming down from the center. That center bulbous thing at the bottom of the saucer, generally known as a planetary sensor, and then they have this dish coming down and this awkward little spindly 90-degree arm.
Well, yeah. I just remember playing Legacy and getting that ship at some point. And there's an Enterprise version of it as well, which again has the Enterprise styling, but it's the same kind of thing.
Yeah. There's an Enterprise version of everything these days.
Yeah.
Nothing can be left alone. It always has to be modified.
No.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but obviously the Reliant exists because it's cheap. It's a reuse of the Enterprise bridge set with different chairs, and they've moved it around a little bit because, it's just easy to do. You just redress the set and away you go.
Yeah.
Which is common for Star Trek,
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
Yeah. And it's fine because it's a Starfleet bridge. There's going to be a kind of design consistency because, it's fine. But it's also, and like I said, I think the implication is it can be run by, I can't remember how many Khan's people are still alive, but that many people.
Well, if you're just going after going for vengeance, all you want is to make sure that you've got someone in engineering to keep the power going. Someone in the weapons pod to make sure that everything's loaded and ready to go, and then you've got your bridge crew, and that's it. You don't need anybody else. You don't care. You're going to run essentially, for want of a better description, you're going to run the ship into the ground.
Yeah. Isn't it a shame that Chekhov is going quite far in his career? He was a first officer, and then he just, for the rest of his career, he just sits doing nothing on the Enterprise.
Yeah. That sucks.
Yeah, poor guy.
Yeah, Chekhov has always gotten the short straw.
Yeah. Sulu gets his own command. What does Chekhov do? He gets to sometimes captain the Enterprise.
Harassing them for it.
Yeah.
I will be Captain Sulu.
If anything, I would have.
Why?
Oh my!
I require a bigger ship.
Mine's bigger than yours.
That's a big ship, not as big as our captain.
Curved and ribbed for his pleasure.
See what you did there.
But yeah, in universe, it would have made more sense for Chekhov to be in command of the Excelsior.
It certainly would have been, yeah.
Based on what you actually hear people talk about on screen.
But Walter Koenig wasn't pushing for it.
No, he didn't seem to care.
There was a lot of speculation of Chekhov as Sulu's first officer, which would have actually been nice.
Yeah,
that would have been really nice to see.
Or Uhura as Sulu's first officer would have been really nice.
Yeah. But, as we know, she was happy that her career was winding down.
Yeah.
According to Mr. Adventure.
Yeah.
So, on to Khan, since we've just come onto the ship as a villain. Ricardo Montalban, what a guy, what a performer. This film is just...
I don't think anybody could have been Khan more than he could. No one could have done Khan more than him.
My biggest objection there is, considering he was cast in the 60s, we need someone to play an Indian villain. Let's cast the Mexican guy.
Yeah.
I mean, and obviously, do you recast? Do you use the same actor? You're going to use the same actor. He was great in the role. You wouldn't use anybody else. But at the same time, it's kind of like, they could really have addressed that when they cast Khan for Into Darkness. The fact that instead of actually addressing that, they cast a white guy. Come on.
Yeah. A pasty white guy as well.
Just cast somebody from that part of the world.
Yeah.
What's the problem?
Yeah.
But no.
Not as well known.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah, he was great. It would have been nice if there'd been someone who was ethnically appropriate.
Yes.
But it was a thing of the time.
Yeah,
although they don't mention where he's from anyway in Wrath of Khan. Anyway,
they don't. But I mean, let's be fair. They used that. He was being. It was very much implied, and if you look at kind of the picture that MacGyver's painted of him, it was very much implied that he was some kind of, from that kind of world with that kind of part of the world with the turban and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's not stated, but it's strongly implied, and I can kind of understand why in Into Darkness they didn't want to cast somebody. It's like, let's cast somebody from, India as a terrorist. I can kind of understand why they didn't want to do that, but at the same time, do we have to whitewash this guy?
Well, I mean, in this particular film, I know in the original episode they strongly hint at where he's from, but in this film they don't.
They don't. No,
it's just
not meant. It's not mentioned.
I think that was probably a sensible move, and I suspect maybe he wasn't, but I suspect Meyer probably had this thought like, we're casting a Mexican guy as an Indian. Maybe we should kind of like step back from that a bit. So maybe that was intentional. I don't know. They certainly didn't darken his skin up.
No.
Or his hair, So, maybe there's an intentional effort to kind of step away from that. I don't know. Yeah. Either way, it's a criticism, but Montalban was brilliant in the role. He was great.
Yeah,
so many standout scenes.
It's well done for actually getting Montalban back.
Oh, he was great.
Instead of going the cheap route and recasting with someone else, which they could have easily have done.
They could have. And he was working on Fantasy Island at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which, as Meyer has said on several occasions, that wasn't challenging him, whereas this kind of did.
Mm-hmm. My one big complaint about this movie, and it's it's the way it's structured, and it works. But I wish we'd actually seen a full confrontation between Kirk and Khan, other than over the phone over Skype.
Did I read? I'm sure I read somewhere. Shatner and Montalban never actually ever met one another.
Think they did,
on the set. Their parts were filmed at completely different times.
Yeah,
and it would have been nice if they had, but I suppose I don't know.
You don't quite miss it, though.
I would have liked to have seen it, but I'm not sure it would add anything to it.
Mm.
I think there was a version of the script where they had a fist fight on the Genesis planet and stuff like that.
That rings a bell, and I'm not. That's not what I would want to have seen. I didn't want to see a fight between them. I want to see some physical, face-to-face kind of performance between the two of them.
Yeah.
See both of them chewing up the scenery, and which they kind of do anyway. But it would have been nice to just seen them in the same room doing it.
Even just a nice, they're in the same room negotiating Kirk's surrender and the handing over of Genesis information, and then it would have been much. Then Kirk wouldn't have been able to hide his real intent in the moment. It would have been much harder for him to do that. It would have been interesting to see how they got around that then. It would have been. I agree. It would have been nice to actually have a nice physical interaction between the two, but I understand why it didn't happen.
I understand why it didn't happen, and I think it works fine without having it. Yeah. And I'm not, like I say, I'm not sure from a story point of view we would have gained anything. It's just from a
fan service?
geeky, nerdy, I'd like to have seen them in the same room together.
Yeah.
Scenery.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, it's one of those things that until someone brings it up, you might not realise that, oh yeah, they're not in the same room together. Yeah. Because he only really shares scenes with Chekhov and Tyrell, and obviously his other augment people, one of which may or may not be his son.
Yeah. I mean, the interesting thing about Khan is Khan has changed a great deal since the original series. Because in the original series, he was this cold, calculating, clever, mostly clear-thinking, dictator. Whereas in Khan, in Wrath of Khan, he's not insane, but he's this bitter, revenge-driven guy. Completely different motivations.
Well, it kind of tracks though, because as we know,
yeah, absolutely.
As we know, the defect, if you want, for want of a better description, of the genetically engineered is that they were predisposed to anger and retribution and whatnot, which is why we had the eugenics war. So, in Space Seed, he just wanted to get control of the ship to do his own thing. Mm-hmm. Kirk, however, stops that and maroons him on a planet, and his wife dies on that. So obviously his motivations change from what they were to now. I want Kirk's head on a platter, and he'll do anything he can.
And it is all kind of Kirk's fault. Well, not directly, but Starfleet forget about them. They don't check up on him. The planet blows up and no one notices.
Which, by the way, were utter incompetence. I'm sorry, that's one thing in the story that really does bug me. It's so the crew of the Reliant, who are these highly trained Starfleet officers and a ship full of scientists, go to study this planet. Surely they know where this planet that they're looking for orbits and go, this planet's in completely the wrong orbit. That's strange.
Yeah, also we're approaching the Ceti Alpha system. So you say there's 6 planets.
Where does asteroid belt come from?
Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4,
I know.
5. Yeah.
That's a problem I have with the script, and I've always had with that script. Yeah. It's a nitpick, but it's an issue.
Yeah, and I've seen a sort of re-edited, like almost how it should have ended kind of thing, and it's like, where like, you hear like Ceti Alpha 5, and then you hear Chekhov's "Oh no," and then the Reliant just flies off, and that's we're going to look somewhere else.
That's funny. That's funny. I suppose it could be explained a little bit as it just shows you that Starfleet isn't entirely infallible.
But then this is a problem I often have with it, and I find Meyer does this more so in 6 than he does in 2, but he's got this slight tendency to make the Starfleet officers look incompetent, either to get a laugh or to advance his plot. And it's not just Meyer; you see it in in TNG and other shows as well. But it's like, you have these professionals there, we're going to make them look incompetent to advance the plot. That's not a good choice from a storytelling point of view.
No.
Well, every time an admiral or someone turns up in the original series or Next Generation, they're
insane.
Yeah.
Or they're an asshole.
Yeah.
Or both.
Well, and then you've got people inexplicably unable to do their job all of a sudden. LaForge in Generations.
Yeah.
In any episode, he would have rotated the shield frequency. He would have figured out in seconds. Oh, hang on, they're breaching through our shields. Right, okay, I've rotated the frequency. Oh, look, they're now not getting through.
I'm now just not going to look at this panel.
Stuff like that I can let slide, because actually you can assume that there was more going on there than actually they could be bothered to explain.
Yeah.
But that could have been better done. But the stuff that lets us do that is kind of geeky, techno-babbly stuff. Once you start getting to geeky, techno-babbly stuff,
fansplaining,
you kind of start losing your you kind of stop being able to argue too much about plot, because it's like, this stuff means nothing. It's nonsense.
Yeah.
But something like space explorers go to a planet they've been to before, and there's a planet missing here. No, that must be the planet we're going to, because that's the Atomos planet. That makes no sense. It's in Star Trek 6 where Valeris has to explain to Chekhov, the chief of security, how the security systems on the ship work. I'm sorry, that's stupid.
Yeah.
What should have happened is Chekhov explains to some junior dimwit that doesn't know. Now, clearly that was there to inform the audience. That's fine as far as it goes. You want to inform your audience. But it should have been someone who wouldn't know this. Chekhov should know this. Why is he the dimwit?
They should have swapped the roles. It should have been Valeris asking.
And then things like the Uhura scene where she can't translate Klingon. Yeah. Since when?
I love him.
And we're looking through all these old books because the Universal Translator is be recognised. Seriously?
Since when?
The Universal Translator would be recognised. Fair enough. So why don't you get the computer to print out your translations on screen and you can read it out?
Yeah. I also love the payoff that Chekhov gets later when McCoy's like, I wonder why they weren't vaporised. And he's like, it would set off the alarm, obviously.
Yeah. But I mean, something like that could have actually been just integrated into there anyway.
Yeah. But yeah, the five... five planets instead of 6 is definitely something that should be noticed.
Yeah,
but
and I mean, that could have easily been addressed.
Yeah, could have been. But I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know how it would have...
You could easily have addressed that from the point of view that maybe they found a way off the planet they were originally on is destroyed, and they've gone on to SETI Alpha 6. SETI Alpha 5 is now uninhabitable.
Yeah, could be.
Or there's
whatever.
nothing to tell you that they didn't leave them enough there that with a bit of ingenuity they couldn't have found a way off the planet. Or maybe someone else had taken them off the planet.
Yeah, could have been anything, really.
Yeah.
Put that aside anyway. I mean, it's what it is. It's like,
it's a nitpick anyway.
Yeah. So, but it's quite funny when you look at Khan's collection of books. With the glory of HD, you can pause and have a look, and it's like, he has Paradise Lost twice. He has 2 copies of Paradise Lost.
Well, maybe it was a special edition.
Yeah, Moby Dick, the Bible, King Lear, and Statute Regulating and Commerce. It's no wonder he went insane. He had
3 books,
yeah, and a textbook, essentially.
That drive me insane.
Yeah, but
they could have at least let him have an iPad with some Star Trek on it or something.
Yeah, it's quite funny how he knows Klingon proverbs and things despite being marooned for all eternity.
Well,
he did read the Enterprise database when he was aboard it.
Yeah,
true, and that's only the books we saw. Then there were obviously a few more rooms in the crashed ship.
Maybe he'd read up on when he was on the Reliant.
Yeah.
Or likely thing is, Khan would have had a look when Khan was originally aboard the Enterprise. He would have read up on what the state of the galaxy was, so he probably knew who the Klingons were, and he'd probably done some reading on them. So I can let that ride.
That old Klingon proverb that's an even older human proverb.
Yeah, that's the one. That was kind of stupid, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like, that is pretty stupid. Yeah. And he's human, and for sake, he's human. Why would he call it a Klingon proverb?
Yeah. Yeah.
There's an old proverb.
It's like the old
Revenge
Vulcan.
is best served cold. Oh yeah, the Klingons say that as well.
It's like the old Vulcan proverb, only Nixon can go to China. So,
well, that was just a really bad joke.
Yeah.
But at least it was intended to be a joke.
Yeah. It might have been Meyer making fun of himself for that Klingon proverb anecdote.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
Perhaps it was.
But Khan, great villain, up there with the best of them. Mm-hmm. For some reason, modern writers have got it in their head that he is essentially Kirk's Joker, which he is not.
Yeah, no.
He's a two-shot villain.
Kirk doesn't have a Joker.
No.
This is the problem.
No. If anything, it would be, I don't know, Kang, or Kankor and Koloth.
I would say he doesn't have one.
No, he definitely doesn't. But he's not a superhero, so he doesn't need a super villain, but... yeah, and I really hate that they've just been trying to ape this film because any attempt to copy it hasn't understood what worked about this film, and what works about this film is the characters and everything that's behind the revenge story.
The biggest problem they have is it's been done. Move on, do something fresh.
But yeah, Montalban steals the show every time he's on screen. Just his kind of delicious, enthusiastic delivery of all these revenge-driven platitudes. Fantastic stuff.
And that was his actual chest.
Yes.
Oh yeah, yeah.
He was ripped.
I actually love the bit where there's plenty of, where he gives Kirk 60 seconds to find the Genesis information, and then all he does is complain for the next minute.
Yeah,
He doesn't.
badgers him.
He just, come on, Kirk, hurry up. And I wonder what he's saying to his maybe not son. When he turns around and has a chat, what are they talking about? Just keep nodding as if I'm still giving orders. That is my favourite sequence in the film, actually. I mean, I love the submarine battle, but it's just the way that, Kirk's like, I know how these ships work, and Spock's like, maybe he's changed that combination. He is quite intelligent, but then he's not that smart.
No, he's driven by revenge at this point, and he's a little on the lax side.
Not to mention, he doesn't have the experience. He's not a naval warfare expert. He's not a space warfare expert.
Which is evident in the fight.
Insight and experience to be able to put it in. He can put it together, but not with the experience, not the way someone who has actually done that and has the physical experience of it can put it together.
Yeah, he's also not got the experience to build a more advanced ship than Starfleet has ever built.
No.
Yeah. When would he do that? But,
well, exactly.
I also love the bit where, when the shields are lowered and he looks at the control panel and you see the kind of point of view shot of him, like looking around, trying to look at what to press. And that's really good. Like, yeah.
But that's good because it so often on these things, someone walks in and they can just do everything and they know where the controls are. He wouldn't.
Yeah.
You would have to think, wait a minute, where would that be again?
Yeah.
What we're looking for? And especially when he's panicked and stressed, it's harder to do things.
Yeah.
You take longer to find the things you're looking for.
Yeah. Although the Enterprise, or the Reliance prefix code is something that could easily be figured out by almost any computer in seconds.
Yeah, but it's not that.
It's, I mean, you can crack passwords in seconds that are less complex than that, or more complex than
in
that.
1982, we didn't have quite the same computer technology to
No,
just
or understanding of it.
Just like you look at the next, the original series Bridge now, and it's been completely surpassed by even older ships that we have today. Earthbound ships are far more technologically advanced than that.
Yeah.
So it's just what we envision in the future for the future at the time.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Besides, it's also something about not boring the audience with too much techno babble.
Yeah.
A nice number being rattled off. Everybody can understand it.
Yeah. The point of that scene is that Kirk has the edge because he has the experience, he has the knowledge. He's learned. He learns how his ship works. He knows his ship, whereas Khan just doesn't. Which is completely counter to the motion picture, where he doesn't even know where the bridge is.
Well, there's obviously a few years have passed since then.
He probably thought, maybe I should do some studying, learn how these things work.
Although I can understand his how that would be. I recently visited a woods that I knew the back of my hand when I used to live in the area, and they've changed it. And certain landmarks have been changed completely. They've cut down trees and they've rerouted the fire breaks, which serve as your paths, just a little, not by much, but it was enough that when I came to a point, I'm like, I have no idea where I am.
Did you bump your head in an overhanging branch and knock yourself out?
No, because I pay attention to that. Scotty learned me good. Taught me well. Always look ahead. Don't look down at your feet.
Yeah.
I know this ship like the back of my clonk. I do like that bit. Sorry, I like that bit. It's funny.
It is, but it's dumb.
It is, but it's dumb.
Yeah.
So I understand how Kirk didn't know, because they've refitted the ship. The internally it looks completely different.
And he forced his way on as well.
Yeah, and he also forced his way on, exactly. So, that's fine. And there's obviously some time has gone on since then. The ship has been retired from active service and is now a training ship. So he's had time to get used to the ship.
Yeah. And I mean that sequence is just really good.
It is really, really nice. It's like that's how he's going to cheat death again.
Yeah, and there's there's all sorts of. It's weird because this film only has two major action. It only has two action sequences actually. This and the naval battle at the end as well.
Yeah.
I mean, you have that kind of horror movie-esque bit that's almost a bit alien-ish, where they're wandering about on Regular One.
Oh yeah. That's a good scene actually.
Yeah, I mean, I love reading about the different fields that are studied on Regular One. Geoplastics, gravitronics, thermonics, and synthostasis. Those all sound great. There's also rats. For some reason.
I was about to say that they've also have rats. Now, either they were laboratory subjects or stored away in some cargo.
Do you think they were testing Genesis on rats? That's a bit.
Who knows?
Yeah. Genesis is a bit of a weird thing because it is, it's a really big deal, but it's kind of thrown in as well. It's just a little side thing that's going on. You could have almost had the plot without Genesis in it at all.
You could.
Yeah,
Almost.
but then there's no reason for Spock to sacrifice himself.
Well, could be they're too close to Reliant.
But you wouldn't need Genesis for that. You could have any kind of big explosion or
I suppose.
anything.
Yeah. There's
But you
actually...
also-
Continue, sorry. Yeah.
Go on.
All right. There's a bit during Regular One as well where I think Kirstie Alley might break character. It's the bit where Kirk punches the glass panel and she jumps.
Does she?
I don't know. And yeah. It's like... I mean, I've noticed it before, but I was reminded of it when I rewatched it. Maybe. But yeah, he punches the panel and she's like... and it just seems weird. It seems like a weird reaction.
I'll have to go and watch that again at some point. I hadn't noticed.
Yeah. But yeah, it's very strange. Although the Regular One bit is, I suppose, probably the slowest part of the film.
Yes.
Because you have some weird stuff going on there. When they go down to the Genesis cave and it's like, look at this! And then they'd never mention it again. Despite the fact you...
Never mention where the sunlight's coming from.
No, that's a weird one. This matte painting thing, whereas, it looks cheap, but they definitely didn't have money for that sort of thing. I don't know. It's fine, but it's just a bit weird. Again, the Genesis thing is just... There's more to it than they ever talk about, and it's never developed again, which is a shame because there's potential to tell a story involving Genesis. Which,
true.
Which they do in books, actually, but, those are books. They don't really count.
I guess they just felt that they wanted to move on screen, on the on-screen variations of Trek. They just wanted to move on and not rehash that bit. It's been done.
Yeah.
But then they rehash other things.
Yeah, I'm glad they kind of left it and moved on.
Yeah, I mean, is there anything else that people can say about the kind of Regular One scenes? It's the most Kirk and Carol stuff because they do have their brief chat, and there's a bit where Savik's asks Kirk if he's coming essentially, and he says to her, "As your teacher, Mr. Spock, is fond of saying, there are always possibilities," which I thought is a funny way to tell someone to bugger off.
Mm-hmm. It's got an extremely loud transporter. What's up with that?
The Reliant's got an old transporter?
No, it's the Regular One transporter that's very, very, very loud.
It's an industrial transporter?
Yeah. It's loud enough that they wouldn't have been able to escape without Khan hearing it.
Well, he wasn't on Regular One at the time, so... Oh, right, when he was savaging them.
Yes, they were. Yeah. The people that got killed, they stayed behind and distracted him while they jumped ship.
Good soundproofing, that's what it is.
Yeah, fair enough. But it was very loud. I think it's unnecessarily loud.
Although he hears Kirk's yell from space, so who knows.
It echoes as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So, talk a bit about the end battle, the submarine battle in the nebula. Obviously, it's quite iconic because it's just so simple. It's two ships, using old methods to find each other. And
groping around in a nebula, yeah.
Yeah.
Probably one of the best battles we've seen in Star Trek, and certainly probably one of the more realistic.
Yeah. And there's some
such a thing.
It's some great imagery as well. You know, the Enterprise rising above, relatively speaking, rising above the Reliant coming from behind them.
Yep.
It's kind of one of the first time we actually see them using tactics, and probably one of the last times we see them using tactics.
I think it's also the first time we actually see manoeuvring. Mm-hmm. Because beforehand, up until that point, all we had was a high shot from the left or right nacelle where the Enterprise just banked off screen.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this and Star Trek 3 are the only films where the weapons seem powerful.
Yeah.
Every time a hit's dealt in this film, you feel it. It's impactful. But in Star Trek 3 as well, they disabled the bird of prey with a couple of torpedoes.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, they just keep hitting each other millions of times until someone complains about the shields being at a certain level.
Well, that's the thing. In the Mutara Nebula, the shields weren't working.
Yeah.
So it was direct contact on the hull.
Yeah, so every shot could be lethal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And, it adds a bit of weight to it. I mean, it's just when you think that, when you watch some of the later battles and, primarily in Voyager and the Next Generation films, particularly Nemesis, it's taking so much punishment, and all you're doing is hearing about shield frequencies.
They made shields too powerful.
Yeah. And
too powerful
not
far too much time.
Too powerful for that
trying
kind
to
of
get
scene.
through shields and not actually accomplishing much.
They completely dispense with them in the Dominion War arc, though.
Yeah,
especially in the big fleet battles that we see in
that was purely because they couldn't afford the effects to put them up on every ship.
Yeah,
so you see ships getting torn in half with one shot and stuff like that.
Or it could just be that the Dominion weapons were that powerful.
That's true.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I mean, even if you look at the Abrams films, the shields don't seem to be there either.
They seem to forget about the shields when the script requires it.
Yeah.
Well,
that's in every series and every film. Really, they forget about it, or they find a way around it.
Well, I mean, I get really bored with the whole shields down to 28%. Like, that means nothing.
It's kind of tedious.
Yeah, it's very tedious. It's just
overused.
All you're doing is reading out numbers. That's it. And showing visual effects, and then that's it. But so it never feels like that anybody's in any immediate danger during space battles later on, because it's just volley after volley after volley. But in this, it's every shot counts, every shot hits, and you feel the impact of it. Which it's partially because there's no shields, but you can achieve that even with shields. I think.
Yeah.
Or screens, as they called them in the original series. But I do love that sequence. It's just, the two-dimensional thinking revelation. And Kirk's like, let's use the Z-axis, and goes down, again, relatively speaking, underneath Reliant. And, again, it shows Kirk's mastery as a tactician. And, of course, Chekhov mans a weapons console, which means he presses a button.
Yeah, something to do.
Yeah.
Yay.
Presses that torpedo button, that crucial button.
Yeah. You were XO of the ship, now press this button and destroy it.
Yeah. Or,
I do like the part where the nacelle comes off, because it's quite nice. It's quite good. Yeah, it's just well done. And
when the Enterprise is trying to limp away from the Reliant, that's tense as hell as well.
Mm-hmm.
They're moving away slowly, and it's pretty clear they're not going to make it, and you've got Spock waving his hands over a plume of radiation. It's very nicely put together. It's very tense. It's interesting, and it's one of those. It's like Leonard Nimoy used to say when he watched Voyager, he got nothing out of it because, again, it was just they would resolve a lot of things with technobabble. So what you'd have is, we have this problem, reroute this to this, we're fixed. Like, there's no drama in that. But what you've got is, you've got essentially Spock teching his way out of the problem, but it's not about what he's doing, specifically what he's doing. It's about, it's about the overall picture of what he's doing. He's in there putting himself in mortal danger, he's fixing something, but you don't really need to hear what he's fixing or how he's fixing it.
No.
Because it informs the drama. He only has a few seconds to get this done, He has to go into lethal conditions to do it.
I think part of the problem here is fans have come to expect that kind of technical language. And
Yeah.
That's what it is. It started being used more and more, and it's just a trope now. It's just something that this is how it's done in Star Trek. You know, they find themselves in a situation and they think their way out of it.
Yeah, by spewing nonsense and then pressing buttons.
But
Indeed, because you can't
they don't do it in
sacrifice
Wrath
a
of
crew.
Khan, so that's cool.
Yeah.
You can't sacrifice a crew member every single episode to get out of a situation.
No. But you can think of other ways around it. I mean, they did in the original series. They were usually character-informed solutions. Of course, you could always have Kirk go inside and kick something. That helps.
And rip a shirt.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Moving on.
But yeah, that's a really cool sequence. You know, it's just it's almost this old school kind of tension you don't get in films anymore, or not very often. You know, it's this you feel the urgency, and then there's plenty at stake. And,
well, Nick Meyer is a very old school filmmaker.
yeah,
But yeah, I agree. I mean, it's very much informed by old war movies from the 40s and 50s and probably 60s.
yeah,
It's a
Yeah,
very
it's-
good sequence,
and
and
it
it
benefits
keeps
from
you keeps on the edge of your seat right up
Yeah.
to the end.
and it's visually amazing. You know, with the nebula effects, all the weird lights and everything else. You know,
Thunder.
yeah, the Mutara Nebula effect gets used multiple times in Next Generation and stuff. Most notably in the Best of Both Worlds, it's the same. You know, they just impose the Enterprise D on it.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, it's a free effect. Use it. Yeah,
It's bought and paid for.
yeah. So, anything else on any of the kind of action? I mean, there isn't much of it, which is good. You know,
It's well paced. The score to it is absolutely fantastic.
James Horner's score is incredible in this film. You know, and it's funny he was hired because he was cheap. He was young and cheap at the time, and obviously he
actually-
went on to do some of the biggest films you've ever seen. And
Where he reused a lot of his scores over.
Yeah, he
but,
reused
you know.
he reused a lot of his score, particularly in Aliens.
yeah, there's a very Wrath of Khan vibe in Aliens
Oh,
to
definitely.
the score. And he reuses it throughout the Star Trek films as well, because he scores 3 as well, doesn't he? And it's this, well, it's like Giacchino. He riffs on his own themes for.
Although I must admit, the 3 score, just like the film, is a little bit on the slow side.
I like the score for 3.
I mean, it's nice.
It's especially amazing during the Enterprise escape sequence.
That's a good
Yeah,
sequence.
Yeah.
So that is a very good sequence, and the Enterprise coming home sequence as
Yeah.
well. You know, when everybody's standing up and looking at the damage.
Yeah,
You know, it's obviously it's not normal there for Starfleet ships to limp back in that kind of condition.
yeah,
And the music and the visuals just communicate that very well. But
Indeed.
it's still a little bit on the slow side. But other than that, yeah. But
it's a
James,
slower film though.
yeah, indeed, exactly. And Horner adapted his music to that perfectly.
And then you get what's his name in Star Trek 4 with his cartoony score. It was pretty weird.
Well, that was kind of appropriate for Star Trek 4, I guess.
It's still a bit of a stupid score. I would never turn it on and listen to it on its own.
I love the chase music.
That's like Looney Tunes cartoonish.
It's
That's
fantastic. It's great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
with Craig on that one.
I like
But
it.
it kind of works. It works for the movie.
It works for the movie. It certainly does, and I like how the movie it doesn't take itself too seriously.
Yeah.
It was a nice little break from all the death and responsibility and whatnot from the previous 2 films.
Yeah.
We visited a lot of those spots in and around San Francisco when we were there last year. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, I saw your picture of what was the Cetacean Institute and all that
Indeed.
stuff.
The
yeah.
Monterey Aquarium.
Yeah.
An actual factual place.
It's the same sign.
Yeah.
They just covered up the bit that said Monterey Bay Aquarium and put Cetacean Institute over it.
Weird. I wonder why they just didn't use the real place. It's where they were anyway.
Probably because it's not actually in San Francisco.
Oh, right.
Whereas the implication in 4 is the the aquariums in San Francisco. It ain't. Monterey Bay Aquarium is like, a 90-minute, 2-hour drive from San Francisco. So that shot where you see the whale tank in San Francisco in the background, San Francisco's not in the background.
No. It's also most likely the fact that advertising, they didn't want to advertise it. So they probably had to pay to actually use the place. And use that section as a location. Pay a permit and whatnot, and pay the manager or whoever was in charge to in order to film there. You'll find that sometimes places that just volunteer their place, especially these days anyway, places that volunteer their premises, the name just remains intact.
Is it near Alameda, though? That's the real question.
No.
No.
Alameda's across the bay, literally across the bay. I've been on that corner as well, actually.
Oh, yeah, where they keep the nuclear vessels.
Yeah, that nuclear vessel scene, I've been right on that spot.
That was an actual cop that was there, wasn't he?
I'm not sure.
There's all sorts of conjecture about that scene because, like, I don't think that nobody knew we were filming at the time. It's like, well, someone would have probably recognised what we're carrying out.
They would have had a crew. I mean, they would have known they were filming. There would have been a big crew there.
Yeah, and they would have had to get people to sign contracts because they were appearing in the film. You know,
I think there's probably a little bit of truth in there, but it's like a little germ of truth. But
either way, it's a funny sequence.
But Alameda is literally across the bridge.
Yeah. So she was quite true when she says, "I don't know about that. I think it's across the bay in Alameda."
Yeah. And we went to Alameda as well.
You have
and visited a naval vessel in Alameda.
Nice.
But it wasn't the Enterprise.
No, neither was that one. So.
No, it was the...
it was the Ranger.
Ranger, that was it, your Ranger.
Yeah. So, we've talked quite a little bit about the impact this has on the rest of the franchise. Is there any more either you can say about it? I mean, I think it's extremely influential in what Star Trek would become, certainly in the films. Next Generation is almost a counter to this, because they move away from the militarism, but this certainly persists up until Generations, really.
It definitely had a lasting effect. I mean, look at the uniforms, for example. They're used in every film up until Generations.
And several episodes of the Next Generation.
Exactly. So the uniforms themselves, I think it's the most, when we limit ourselves to the films, it's the most used uniform. Yeah. Because in every film afterwards, they've got a different costume.
And it's in service for about 50 years or something in universe.
Longer.
Yeah. 70 years longer. Maybe. Yeah.
I mean, I would argue that in a lot of ways, Wrath of Khan was kind of like the evolution of Star Trek anyway. I mean, it really it was the first thing that kind of differed. It got what Star Trek was, but it also moved it on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And certainly the type of storytelling they do there very much influence what would come after, as you've said. Almost too much, really, because they spend the next 20 years trying to ape Wrath of Khan in pretty much every movie. Well, Meyer even does it himself to an extent.
Yeah, it gives the franchise a bit of a visual stamp as well. Like, this is what Star Trek looks like in the movies. You know, the first... the motion picture was kind of trying to copy 2001 in terms of design aesthetic in some ways, or certainly other sci-fi movies of the time. Mm. You know, you had the white jumpsuits and the very kind of futuristic, well-lit white hallways and stuff like that. And, you know, it's pretty boring to look at, but it was kind of, at the time, that's like what the future looked like, wasn't it?
Well, part of that as well was that the director, Robert Wise, wanted the bland colours because he didn't want them to stand out.
Yeah.
It was to do with making the actors' faces stand out. I can't remember the exact quote. But he didn't want the costumes to be too dominant on the screen.
Mm. Yeah. But the Wrath of Khan costumes, they have a flap that can be opened or closed depending on how much business Kirk means.
Well, that's more... I mean, certainly you want... When you're talking about putting things up on a screen, you want more detailed costumes that have more interesting detail on them, that are more complex looking, because it just translates better to the screen.
Yeah. Meyer said he wanted pockets, but he lost that battle, apparently.
Yeah.
Because he just wanted people to be standing with their hands in their pockets for some reason.
Well, it would have been good if they put pockets on, because I've never agreed with the whole no pockets thing, but... And, it's easy enough to put hidden pockets in things too, so...
Yeah. People need to carry stuff.
Yeah, I always thought that was a flawed argument, but,
Yeah. Whatever, yeah. That's one thing Enterprise was good at. There was zip pockets everywhere.
There were pockets, yeah.
But they were wearing...
Enterprise.
They were wearing NASA jumpsuits, essentially, so...
They were.
Yeah.
Well, it's in a less complicated time in the Star Trek universe.
Yeah.
Less advanced.
But yeah, it's a hugely impactful film, and I think to science fiction in general as well. I mean, it's still talked about to this day. It's still held up as a benchmark of good science fiction, even though there's not really... Well, the Genesis thing, that's science fiction, but the rest of it, not so much, other than the kind of mechanics of they're on a ship.
Apart from the spaceships and beaming technology and whatnot, I'm kidding on here, obviously.
Yeah, but you can almost take that as read because you're watching Star Trek. Those are the things that come with it, But yeah, the story itself is not a sci-fi story.
Yeah, there's not too much out there. It's not too hoi polloi. It's a well-grounded story. He's been wronged. Now he wants to exact revenge.
Yeah, you could almost set it on a naval ship in this time period and get a similar story.
I'm fairly certain there have been similar stories anyway. I'm sure there's a film out there where a ship's captain goes after his opposite number because he had his ship sunk from under him by that person. Yeah. He's going to get revenge.
Well, there's that TV show, The Last Ship, which has plenty of that kind of stuff in it. As far as I know. I only saw season 1 and got bored. But
I don't watch it.
Yeah, it's I don't know. It's all right if you like that sort of thing, I suppose. Sandy, you might like it.
Yeah, I've been
watching it. A lot of naval stuff in it.
I have been watching it, yes.
Oh, you have been? Okay. Well, you haven't stopped watching it, so you must like it.
I haven't stopped watching it.
Yeah,
there are a couple of episodes where you're like...
But it's Michael Bay's fan wanking of the military, I suppose. that comes up a lot.
Well, he gets access to a destroyer.
Yeah.
And the US Navy apparently have seen an influx in rates of people wanting to join.
Of course they have. Yeah.
Apparently.
Thank you, Michael Bay, for Transformers and recruitment and other stuff. Naturally, something with this level of impact. Close off on a bit of a lighter note with nitpicks and parodies. Is there any you can think of? Family Guy have picked on this quite a few times.
Family Guy's the only one that springs to mind, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, there's the bit where Stewie's teddy bear, his funeral, which is just the recreation of the Spock's funeral scene.
And of course, the Khan moment has been parodied many, many times, and in all sorts of different ways. Replacing the word Khan with something else, but using the same inflection and whatnot. It's been used so many times.
Yeah, and Futurama, they're always picking on Star Trek, and they've picked on this film a few times, namely in the episode that had most of the original series cast when Fry got asked the question, who'd Kirk maroon on Ceti Alpha 5? And Shatner yells the answer. So good.
Forgotten about that one.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Family Guy did another type of... They've parodied this a few times.
What hasn't Family Guy parodied?
Yeah. When did it stop becoming interesting? But, how many times do you think the Orville are going to poke fun at this?
Oh, every week, probably.
Yeah, they might actually make references to it in some way or another. You never know. Yeah.
And I think it's almost been parodied in the show itself, specifically in A Mirror Darkly. I think Scott Bakula models his evil Archer performance on Ricardo Montalban to some degree. He's kind of rasping at the camera a lot and acting really insane.
I don't know about that. Maybe.
And if you hear his delivery of "raise them" when talking about the shields as well, it's very kind of Montalban-esque.
I don't know. I'm more inclined to think that's coincidence than anything.
Yeah, I'd say that's a bit of a stretch.
I don't think Bakula's likely to... I could, maybe, but...
Yeah. It's something that he'd need to be asked about, but, I certainly got that impression. And there was the Augments episodes of Enterprise where I forget the actor's name, but Malik, the lead Augment guy, he was Montalban light in the way he was acting.
Well, that would make sense.
Yeah,
that would make sense, yes.
He was trying to ape the line delivery, but he wasn't very good. So
maybe he was just doing what he was directed to do.
Yeah, maybe. But yeah, I've never seen this film before. Why are you making me break up my speech like this?
Maybe.
Yeah, but I don't know. Yeah, but it's probably had quite a few parodies that I can't even think of. I'll maybe look up some extras for the show notes, but
nothing's really coming to mind right now.
No. But the funeral scene one's hilarious because it is just a shot-for-shot remake. And even, Seth MacFarlane as Stewie copies Shatner's delivery down to the down to the last detail.
Down to the quivering lip.
Yeah. Although, do you not think Spock would be insulted by Kirk's eulogy?
Most likely. You'd probably say, I found that your eulogy most illogical.
Yeah, or offensive. Yeah.
Almost offensive.
Yeah. I mean, as Scottish people, we should be insulted by the fact that Scotty can, of course, play the bagpipes.
Why should we be insulted by that?
All Scottish people can play the bagpipes, apparently.
I see where you're coming from.
Yeah, I do.
I mean, I'm not terribly insulted by it. I'm just thinking, I'm just thinking out loud. But the funeral scene, it's just weird that you've got Scotty playing the bagpipes. Like, why? And why would it be a Vulcan funeral with
It's an American
bagpipes?
thing. Seriously, it's an American thing.
Well, Americans think we all wear kilts and...
Yeah, the Americans, all Americans think that they're Scottish.
Yeah.
And they all wear kilts. At DragonCon, when I first went there, I decided, maybe I should take my kilt. So
I once had an American say to me, do you guys actually have Star Trek in Scotland?
Oh, crazy.
Yeah, we have television and electricity, thanks.
No, for we live in caves. And
I actually had one going. I says, I'm away to go and hunt haggis.
Yeah.
You need only watch that episode of Next Generation to know how all Americans, not all Americans, but a lot of Americans see Scotland.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Yep, that's how a lot of them see us.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm pretty sure some of them think we're a third world country.
They're not far from the truth, to be honest.
Well, that's true. Yeah, but,
But we do have running water, and
we have internet.
We have internet, yes.
We're on the internet right now. We
are.
In fact, we're actually more progressive with the internet than we are in some places in America. Seriously.
That's very true.
You go to any place around here, any public place, and there'll be some sort of Wi-Fi.
Mm-hmm.
Over in America, not so much.
There is none.
The Wi-Fi in... Sorry.
There's no Wi-Fi in Disneyland, California.
Wow.
No Wi-Fi.
That's not actually a bad...
Certainly not when I was there.
That's not a bad thing.
They don't want you on the Wi-Fi. They want you on the rides.
Yeah, that's not a bad thing. When I was at Universal in... I know it's Universal, but they'll have the same kind of idea. In Universal, I saw so many people with their faces in their phones. And the only time they took their faces out of the phones was when they were being told, no, you can't have that in your hand on the ride. You need to store that, please. I'm like, what a waste. So, turn the Wi-Fi off. Then they can't have their faces in their phones.
Well, they just use their data, but,
Well, yeah, which is what I did.
But the... back to the sort of funeral sequence, because it is a big sequence. It's a big deal. But it is a weirdly structured funeral for a Vulcan. You think it's... Everything about it is not what Spock's
funerals are not for the people
been.
that are dead. Funerals are for the people that are left behind.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's just weird that they leave his body on the planet. I mean, it's good that they did.
Well, they don't leave his body on the planet.
No, they expect it to burn up, I think.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. But even then, obviously God knows what his wishes were. It certainly wasn't Sarek's wishes.
Well, maybe those were his wishes.
Yeah.
We don't know. It's never been expressed.
It doesn't make much sense because you think, well, if he thinks he can transfer his Katra, then surely let's face it, it was tagged on at the end because they weren't expecting him to come back.
Yeah.
But we'll give ourselves an out just in case.
Just in case, maybe.
And when they wrote that scene, they didn't know what their out was.
True, yeah, which, remember, and then that was it. Yeah, and it's one of those things that it's easy to kind of slip past because it just kind of happens, and then the rest of the film happens, and it's not brought up in the film. Mm-hmm. So it's just one of those. McCoy isn't even starting to act like Spock yet.
It could very well be that they filmed that sequence, the Remember sequence, long after all the other sequences, and after Nimoy had already agreed, okay, if I'm directing the next two...
Yeah, I don't think that was the case. I think it was much later that they convinced Nimoy to come back. And I think, if I recall, that scene was basically stuck in to give them an out if they thought of it, if he did come back. But they certainly, at that point, didn't have any plan about how he was going to come back, if he would come back. So it was really just, we'll throw this in. And certainly, the scene where the bit that was... Actually, no, the bit that was scripted, the bit that was thrown in at the end was the torpedo on the surface.
Yeah.
Yes.
That was let's just give ourselves an out just in case. They had no idea what they were going to do at that point.
Yeah.
So any idea that McCoy should maybe be acting like Spock, it wouldn't be there because it wasn't on the radar at that point. It wasn't until later on when Nimoy said, okay, I'll come back if I direct. They then had to go and say, okay, what the hell are we going to do now? How do we write ourselves out of this corner? Much like with Best of Both Worlds, where they got to the end of the season and went, right, okay, now what do we do?
Of course, all they had to do was beam Khan aboard and use some of his magic blood.
Let's not go there. Let's not go there.
I still want to see that. I mean, I'll never see it now, but that scene where young Spock talks to his older self, and his older self is like, so how did you solve that Khan problem? And it's like, it's fine, Kirk died, but then we brought him back using Khan's blood, and then old Spock's just like, what?
Yeah.
Yeah. You mean I didn't have to, age on a planet again?
Yeah. The less said about that, but the better.
Yeah.
Indeed.
It's almost like, you could almost call Into Darkness a parody of this film, actually.
No, I don't think Into Darkness has got that much in common, apart from one scene that is stolen from...
That scene is certainly a parody, because it's... Yeah. Because it's like, what is this? Why are you doing this?
Yeah, again, Khan's out for revenge, and we've ripped off a scene for parody. Yeah, and the scene wasn't intended to be parody, but it certainly plays like it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, what are you doing?
It's like, oh my god, that's terrible.
Yeah, replace Kirk with Spock, job done.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah.
Bet the fans won't see this coming.
Yeah.
No. Worked it out in the first 5 minutes, but okay. Yeah. Yeah, so I think we've had a conversation about this film. I don't think we've covered anything that hasn't been covered in multiple other podcasts and other featurettes and other things that talk about this film, because, everybody talks about it all the time. Where they say, somewhere in the world, someone's watching Star Wars. Somewhere in the world, someone is talking about Wrath of Khan at all times.
I would agree with that.
Yeah. So, yeah, there's a bit of Star Wars trivia. I don't know how true it is, but it's fine.
I always said it was somewhere in the world someone's watching Star Trek.
That too, yeah. Or, you can say that about any franchise now.
That's very true.
Somewhere in the world, someone is watching a Marvel movie or TV show. Yeah, whatever.
Indeed.
But someone will be talking about this film as we speak that isn't us. So there we go.
Quite possibly.
Yeah. So, is there any kind of final points on it from anyone? Any kind of summation remarks?
Yeah, we probably wouldn't, and I think this is fairly well acknowledged already, but we wouldn't have had any of the modern spin-offs that we've had without Wrath of Khan.
Yeah.
Agreed.
If nothing was spinning off of motion picture. I mean, I still think it's a solid movie, but it wasn't successful. It wasn't, if we hadn't had Star Trek 2, I don't think we would have had any other Star Trek movies. We might have had a reboot of Star Trek in general around about now. It probably would have been a franchise that was dead for 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
And then, they probably would have Battlestar Galactica'd it.
Probably, actually. Can you imagine that world?
Yeah.
Yeah. Where you have the original series with some twists.
Mm-hmm. And that's probably what we would have got.
Yeah. Interesting.
No, I think you're right. Yeah, I think Wrath of Khan breathed a new breath of life into Star Trek and got the interest in the genre back.
Yeah, I would agree. Obviously, I wasn't around at the time, but
Technically, I was, but
yeah,
wasn't aware of it.
But it's one of those films that, it's... I mean, I rewatch most of the Star Trek films, even the crap ones, but this one in particular is one that I'll just stick on for the hell of it because it's great, and it has a good cast of people performing very well, tight script, tight story, great visual effects that still hold up because model effects always will. It's just because it's real stuff. You're looking at real stuff. As opposed to CGI, which dates eventually, even the good stuff. Not that I'm ragging on CGI, I think CGI is a fine tool, but...
I've seen some model work that has aged.
Yeah, well, like the original series, for instance, it's pretty dated model work now, but this, the highly detailed models, which means they last a whole lot longer. And they're also well lit, which helps, make them look a bit more...
Stands up to scrutiny more.
Yeah. Of course, yeah. The only bit that stands out is, well, this is more in Star Trek 3 when you watch it in HD and you can see the kind of the blending bit where the Enterprise is flying towards space dock, and you see these lighter squares around the Enterprise.
The travelling mat, yeah.
Yeah. So if you watch that in HD, it stands out like a sore thumb. There's probably bits like that in this film, but I didn't notice it actually when I was rewatching it. And I've got the 50th anniversary edition with the director's edition, which has those 3 or 4 added scenes that should have been there anyway. But yeah, I love this film. I'll keep going back to it. I wish they'd stop trying to make it again. Let's have the next Star Trek film, whatever it may be, not be about some idiot bent on revenge.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Yeah.
It would be, yeah.
I mean, even Krall was motivated by revenge, but he wasn't that important. But, everyone else has been, and it's boring, and it's, let's have people motivated by something else. Or no villains. Let's try without a villain for once. No bad guys to punch. That'd be interesting. Maybe. But this had a bad guy that didn't get punched, so whatever. But great film. That's all I can really say about it. I mean... Absolutely. Yeah. So, I think on that note, I shall beam you back to where you belong. Hopefully. So if you'll just step into the transporter pad... Is that
I don't trust you.
Yeah, well... It's either that or you don't go home.
You
don't have to go home, but you can stay. Okay? Well, thank you for joining.
No problemo.
No problem, yeah.
And...
It's been a pleasure.
Energizing. That was our occasional discussion of Wrath of Khan. As always, if you enjoyed what you heard here, then you can find us on iTunes, YouTube, or any major podcasting app. Hit that subscribe button, join us in the next Kneel Before Pod, and, as always, live long and prosper.